What's going on, boys? It is day number 8 of reading through the book of John. Today, we have a lot to cover in this chapter. Just really quick, I just want to show you just the page of notes that I have down, just to kind of, signify the things that I just kind of, feel when I'm reading each and every one of these chapters. And, what I like to do is, I have the verse and I'll write it down, and I have the verse right here, and then I kind of make these little notes out to the side. I like to bullet point and kind of make 2-3 bullet points per verse to kind of really break out what that verse is telling me, or at least what I feel is being spoken in the moment. So just for clarification, to start off with, we're going to look at a story of this woman who is caught in the act of adultery. And so the Pharisees, they bring this woman to Jesus because they've heard about Jesus being this, he's a rabbi, he's a teacher, so they're like, well, she's planning to be stoned. Jesus, what do you have to say about it? Like, you've been doing all these things. Like, what do you, like, we're curious to know what you have to say about it. And I think it's just incredible the way he responds. And it kind of signifies how all of us need to be towards others, because I myself find myself doing this a lot of times. The simple word to kind of sum up this little section here, verses 7 through 11, is the word judge. So it's verse 7 through 11, and it says, "When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, 'Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her.' Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left. When the woman still standing there, Jesus straightened up and asked her, 'Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?' 'No one, sir,' she said. 'Then neither do I condemn you,' Jesus declared. 'Go now and leave your life of sin.'" So not only does Jesus, prove that he is of higher power than anybody else, but he basically says, it's unfair for man to judge when he himself falls to victim to it as well. That's one of the things I wrote down. How is it okay to say, well, we should, this person deserves to, have this consequence because of what they've done. And obviously, depending on what has happened, it's kind of a different scenario. If it was murder or, a really bad crime, obviously that's a different story. But when we're talking about, sins that are, the most common, so adultery and, lust kind of pretty much fall in the same category, to jealousy, to anger, or gluttony, or just anything like that. All of us do that. Every single person falls into that category. And it's not to say that it's okay, that it's normal. It's just a meaning of that's something that all of us face on a daily basis. And Jesus is saying here, he doesn't condemn this woman. He purifies her by saying, no one has stoned you because they themselves are full of sin as well. So how is it okay that they could stone you because of your sin, yet they themselves sin as well? That's not okay. All people sin. So why is it okay that they think they have more power to, punish you, but yet they themselves are in the same category? They may not have fallen into adultery, but they may have been angry or said some things, or you don't know. But that's really proven that Jesus knows a lot more than we do. He sees and hears conversations that we don't hear. So clearly he is quite aware of every single person at one moment in time. So, but for the remaining part of this chapter, from this verse 12 all the way to verse 60, we're going to be looking at a conversation that Jesus has with some of the Pharisees and then some of just the Jews that are in that particular area. And so, the conversations that he has is, kind of proclaiming, like, again, he's proclaiming who he is in his relationship to the Father, and really, why he is who he is. And he makes a connection to one of the prophets in the Old Testament, Abraham, and he, points people to say, like, look, this is what, Abraham did. And we're going to get to that here shortly, and I'll clarify that. But I first want to start off with the opening verse to this section. The title of this is called Dispute over Jesus' Testimony. It's verse 12. And it says, "When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, 'I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life.'" So only through Jesus can we receive the light of life. Only through Jesus can we be shown the true ways of life, because without Jesus, we are in the dark. We are in the dark with our hands out thinking we know where we're going, but in reality, we don't. Without Jesus, we have this blindfold over our eyes, and we don't know where we're going. We don't know which way's up, which way's down, which way's left. We don't know. We are blinded by the ways of this world because evil exists in this world, and we are easily tempted by it. And the enemy knows that man is easily tempted by it. He knows what man desires. He knows what the flesh likes, and he throws it out there for us, and it easily catches us off guard, and that draws us away from Jesus. But Jesus tells us no. He's like, when you follow me, when you believe in me, he says, you will have the light of the world. You will be able to overcome the enemy. You will be able to overcome the ways of this world. And so the response that the Pharisees give Jesus is, well, your testimony is not valid. And one of the things that I was, really just, called by was that Jesus, doesn't just respond by saying, well, it is valid. This is no. He particularly calls to a particular law that is, supposed to be like inscripted through these Pharisees. They're supposed to know. And he's like, well, doesn't the law that you created that is, from, my father, that was to, your descendants, he's referring back to the days of the Old Testament. And, he says this in verse 17 to 19. He says, in your own law, it is written, the testimony of two witnesses is true. I am one of the witnesses who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me. And the people respond, they say, well, where is your Father? Jesus responds, you do not know me or my Father. Jesus replied, if you knew me, you would know my Father also. See, he's like, you really don't know God. He's like, because if you knew God, you would know exactly who I am. He's like, this moment in time has been something that was set to come for a long time. He says, you don't know who I am. Not because, I'm a powerful, and it's not to say that, Jesus is like, well, I'm a powerful rabbi. There's a lot of powerful rabbis that come along. He's like, but you should have known when I was coming. You should have known who in my relationship to the Father. He's like, I come from the Father. He's like, I only do what the Father tells me to do. And so this creates a lot of dispute. People are confused, as most would, just because these are things that they've never heard before. Because what's happening is you have Jesus, who isn't necessarily, I wouldn't say debating these people, but he's like saying, look, he's like, this is what's going on, but you're not following it. Like, you made these laws and these promises that were made to your ancestors, but yet you're not following them. Like, why is that? Why is that? And so the conversation continues on, with people asking him, like, who are you? And Jesus clearly tells him, like, look, he's like, I come from the Father. I do what only the Father does. And so this thing he says later on, verse 28 through 29, he says, this kind of differentiates people who are going to believe him, or who are going to believe him at the moment, versus people who are going to believe him later on. It says, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me. The one who has sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him. So there are going to be people who are going to believe Jesus right away. There are going to be people who are going to believe exactly what Jesus tells them, in an instant. Where there are going to be others who aren't going to realize it until later on. They're going to be like, oh crap, like that's what that meant. And it's going to click. And I think, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm pretty sure this is relating directly to the crucifixion of Jesus, where you can just imagine people are up there, they're doing what they're told, they're saying they're crucifying Jesus because they see him as a threat. But yeah, when he dies and then he resurrects, people look at him, they're like, oh my gosh, like he wasn't kidding. Like, what have I done? Like, why? And then they'll believe. See, it's not about, everybody thinks they have to see these miracles. They think that they're trying to get Jesus to be like, well, if you're really who you say you are, why can't you perform these miracles right in front of us? Like, why can't you just do things on our command? But it's like, Jesus is like, I don't follow your commands. I follow the commands of the Father, my Father. He's like, you need to get to know him first. You need to get to know him. And the only way you can get to know him is through me. He's like, so here's the key right here to the door. He's like, I am clearly giving you something to connect with him, but you are not taking it. And he's like, why aren't you understanding me? He's like, I want to know why you don't understand. But he does say for those who do believe right away, he says in verse 31, to the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you hold my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So Jesus knows who believes him and who doesn't. He knows who is devoted to him, and he knows who isn't. And I think what he's saying here to those people, he's like, true discipleship starts with Jesus. It starts with Jesus at the center. You saying, look, my life is not valuable. My life is a mess, and I need someone to guide me. I need someone to show me show me my place. I need someone to show me where I need to be going because I can't do it on my own. And that's where Jesus comes in. That's where he says, look, he's like, I am the one that can lead you for that. And so this conversation, again, just continues on. It even talks about the whole act of slavery with, Jesus talking about it, and Jesus isn't referring to, actual labor slavery, but he's talking about being slaves to sin. And again, he's referencing, look, it's like when you believe in me, he's like, you'll be free of being sin to slave. This is verses 34 through 38 where he references this. And here's where we get to the part where they're referencing a man called Abraham. Abraham was a very powerful man in the Old Testament that was very devoted to God's teachings and did whatever God told him to do. And I believe that, Abraham knew that there was going to be a moment that would be the coming of Jesus. I believe that he knew that. God revealed that to him. And the people are thinking, well, we're doing what, our father Abraham did. And Jesus is like, okay, that's great. But what you're doing right now, questioning me and, not believing, he's like, that's not what Abraham would do. And he says, people are like, well, Abraham was our father. And Jesus is just like, well, you claim that, the real father is, he's like, you claim that my father is your God. Verse 42 through 47, he says, Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me. For I have come here from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me? Can any one of you prove me guilty of sin? If I am telling the truth, why don't you believe me? Whoever belongs to God hears what God says. The reason you do not hear that word is because you do not belong to God. So a lot's happening. Jesus is like, well, if you proclaim that, he's like, that God is the Father, and you proclaim that God is your Father, then why don't you believe my teachings? Why don't you believe that I did come from God when clearly I have fallen no account? I have no account of being guilty. I have done nothing wrong. He's like, reference back to the two witnesses thing. He's like, look, we're going to reflect back to the law. You say you need two witnesses to be true. The witnesses are myself and God himself. He's like, I don't understand what is so confusing for you to not believe what I'm saying. He's like, the reason why, you are, blinded by this is because you are led by the schemes of the devil. And he calls the devil the father of lies. The devil just lies to us. He is, drawing people away from the Lord with lies, drawing people away with things that seem to desire us, but in reality they don't. Jesus comes to the Father, yet people still don't believe. Jesus questions why people seem just surprised at his words. He's like, why are you surprised at my words? You should know this. You should know about this already. This shouldn't be a surprise. This shouldn't be like a surprise. And I think the question, the whole thing with it is that, I think people did know that there was going to be the coming of, the Son of Man would come, this prophet, the Messiah, as those called. But they didn't expect him to come in this way. They haven't quite figured out. They're not thinking that, like, no, this man can't be him. Like, because if it was really him, he would be this powerful person that would be, overruling, the Roman Empire and overruling, the world. But it's like, yes, Jesus did come to be powerful, but he didn't come to be this leader over mankind in a way that said, hey, like, our group of people is going to be better than yours. No, he came to make dead people alive. And this transition, was going to go over for a long period of time, over centuries at a time. So nearing the end, I have two more things I want to read. Verse 54 through 56. Jesus says, if I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. My Father, whom you claim as your God, the one is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not know, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I obey his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. So Jesus is glorified by God. He believes in God. He listens to God. He obeys God. He's like, I obey God. He's like, there are some of you, he's like, most people out there don't. You're speaking all these facts, but yet you don't obey God. You hear God's word, but you don't obey it. You don't live it out. And even at the end, when he talks about Abraham, he's like, Abraham rejoiced the day of, my coming. And he got a vision of it, and he was proud. He's like, so why is it that you still question me? Last thing that I want to read is a great indication of who Jesus really is. Really proclaiming that he is 100% man and 100% human and 100% God. Verse 58, he says, very truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. So I actually had to do a little bit of research on it. And what Jesus is saying here is that he is the everlasting God. He was, he is, and he will always be the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. Through all eternity and all time. Jesus has been there since day one, and he'll be with us on the last day. Most of us can't really wrap our head around that. As we think that, how is it possible that way? Well, Jesus has been there since day one, the Holy Trinity. And it really just kind of signifies the fact that God was willing to step out of glory and come down as a man. God could have come down in any form that he wanted. He could have come down in his natural present state, but people would have known. So I think, God came down, I wouldn't say he came down anonymous, but he came down in a way that he was able to relate to humanity. So that way when he spoke words, we would understand it. Because if God spoke in his regular ways, a lot of times people don't get it. But God came down as a man to speak these words, to say, look, the ways you in life right now you're living are wrong. He's like, this is the way you need to be following. He's like, follow me, and I will show you so much more than you could ever get from these things that you claim make you happy on this world. So that's where we will finish off for today. Today's daily prayer is titled In Peace, and the verse we're at is Psalms chapter 4, verse 8, which says, in peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. When I am anxious and full of concern about my existence, give me your peace, Jesus. Help me to look to you in the most difficult times. I do not want my heart to dwell upon this life and the weak things it offers. I want you to find me committed to your word and the obedient to your call. When you return, Jesus, I want to be ready with a lamp that is full and bright. I want to hear you speak over me, that you are pleased with me. So we must be willing to do whatever it takes to get as close to Jesus as possible, because we know one day he'll come back. He is going to come back. And while we don't know when that day is, I think for all of us, we need to be understanding that only through trust and belief in Him can we receive eternal life. Can we receive the light of life? Because there are going to be people in this world who are going to disagree with us, who are going to hate us, who are going to, tell us that we're wrong. But with Jesus, all things are possible. And when we stay true to Him, nothing else matters. When we stay true to Jesus, everything else will fall into place. I hope that word encourages you today. I know this is a long video. We're at 20 minutes. But I hope this word encourages you. Hope that you guys have had a great week, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, boys.